They number nearly 250 million worldwide. Almost half of them live in extreme poverty. They are widows, many discriminated against and relegated to a life of isolation. In India, we get a glimpse of what life is like for these forgotten women. Here's our story. On the banks of the Ganges River, many believe it's the point where life and death meet. A place where prayer fills a soul with hope. Women across India flock here every year with their families, offering prayer to the gods in the name of good health and prosperity for their husbands. Most shudder at the thought of being widowed. It's a fate many here, like 73-year-old Kamla, consider a death sentence. Widowed 40 years ago, Kamla was left alone to raise 5 children, 2 sons and 3 daughters.
When my husband died, we had no money. He died in an accident when he was coming home from work. I was only 32 years old.
Kamla managed to find some work sewing, and eventually, when her boys grew up, she looked to them for help. But in an attitude toward widows that's all too common in India, her sons and their wives considered her a burden and turned their backs on her, making life a living hell.
I asked my younger son, when I get old and I cannot work, then you won't give me food? And he said, I will not give you food. How much pain I felt.
First of all, a woman is looked down upon, and if you're a widow, it's a double discrimination.
Dr. Mohini Giri is a human rights activist fighting for these invisible, forgotten women for the past 4 decades. Dr. Giri says that there's widespread discrimination against the more than 40 million widows living in India.
There was one widow who was lying dead on the streets. And the vultures were coming and eating her flesh, dogs were coming there, and the people were walking past it and nobody was caring even to pick up the dead body. And that really shook me absolutely.
Deemed as having no value without a husband, many widows are forced to live in isolation and misery. A life that many themselves believe is their destiny. The situation is so tragic that some widows even commit sati, throwing themselves on their husband's funeral pyre in an act of self-immolation. So entrenched is the attitude towards widows that it's believed that if a widow commits sati, she will not only end her own suffering, but that her village will flourish and she will become a goddess. A temple was even built in the name of one such woman. Priest Ajay Tiwari guards the temple around the clock.
People keep coming from far and near to visit the temple every day to get a glimpse.
Sati, while illegal in India and not supported by all Hindus, is still practiced in central and northern India, regions known for their deep spirituality. Many of India's vulnerable widows come to the area to settle here, in the holy city of Vrindavan, a city of temples, pilgrims and hermits. There are more than 16,000 widows living in Vrindavan. So many that it's now commonly known as a city of widows. They come here waiting for death, hoping that they'll go straight to heaven. Most live in solitude. Following the customs relegated for widows, they wear white, cut their hair short, and eat only once a day. Many barely survive on scraps of food and a few rupees daily that they may get from singing in temples. And those who can no longer sing resort to begging in the streets, living one day at a time. But a glimmer of hope interrupts the darkness as Dr. Giri's determination to help them takes on a life of its own. Haunted by the vision of a widow she saw laying dead on the street, she began traveling the world, advocating for widows and raising funds to fulfill her mission. And in 2008, Dr. Giri realized a goal. She built an ashram, or shelter for widows. Also located in Vrindavan, it's now home to some 500 women.
What am I trying to achieve? To give dignity in death to these women, to give them a healthier life. Women are now totally empowered.
And that includes Kamla. Banished by her sons and too embarrassed to move in with her daughters who struggled to feed their own families, Kamla spent years moving from relative to relative. She finally knocked on the doors of Dr. Giri's ashram for help in 2010.
It looks nice. We get to eat and drink. Everybody lives together here.
For so many, it's a world away from the streets they once lived on. It's a clean place to live, a chance to gather together, to work in harmony. And to keep the widows here as healthy as possible, a medical team is also available on the compound for routine medical checks and therapy. But while the ashram may be a haven for some, Dr. Giri knows that in order to bring about real change for India's widows, there's one thing she still must do.
Change the mindset of man that they should not look down upon these widows.
Devaluing women is an attitude that's been deeply entrenched for centuries in India, she says.
From childhood, a boy is taught that you are superior. How can he change? The mother says, "You are a king, my little boy," but the girl is not given the same treatment in the house.
Dr. Giri says attitudes are shifting somewhat as modernity takes over traditional ideology. But there is still a long way to go, she argues.
How are we going to change that overnight? Especially when there is no literacy, when there is no education, when suspicion and superstition persists everywhere. And I have to change all those men in India in order to see that women get justice.
And while that may be something that comes too late for Kamla, her life now, she says, is finally filled with reflection and kindness. She has found an inner peace. Life at the ashram with the other widows, she says, has brought her purpose, allowing her to once again feel useful. She's helping to train younger women to acquire skills to prevent them from going hungry like she did for so many years. And she's determined to take care of other elderly widows who no longer have strength in their frail bodies. For Kamla and so many others here, they can now face life and death with the dignity that was once denied them.
When I get sick and my hands and feet stop working, I will live and die here.